Welcome to this episode of Unraveling Adoption, an intentional space to delve into adoption's complexities together. I am Beth Syverson, an adoptive mom of a unique and delightful 20-year-old son, Joe, who is launching as an adult. I'm walking beside him while working on my own personal growth and healing. I'm also a certified coach helping primarily adoptive parents. Joe and I are committed to helping anyone touched by adoption, and we want to help the general public understand adoption's complexities better too. Have you ever thought about the extra layers that LGBTQ plus adoptees have to deal with, especially when you consider search and reunion? Today's guest is another Joe Toolan, a transracial adoptee from Guatemala who grew up in a conservative white family in Maryland. He identifies as a queer, Latine, indigenous, transracial, international adoptee and environmentalist. In 2023, he reunited with his birth family in Guatemala. Let's hear about what extra challenges he's had to deal with growing up and in reunion as a queer adoptee. So welcome to Unraveling Adoption, Joe. Glad you're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to share my story and be here with you.
Yeah, good. Lots to unravel today. And we always strive to lift up marginalized voices here on Unraveling Adoption. And as a lesbian myself, I'm particularly happy to always have LGBTQ plus voices as guests on our show. So why don't we first just hear the basics of your adoption story and your early childhood? How did that go for you?
Sure. So I was adopted at a very early age. I was born in Guatemala, and I was here in the United States with my adopted family by the time I was 3 months old to the day.
Oof, that's very fast for international adoption, no?
It is. It's very fast. It kind of was a reason why a lot of folks actually adopted from Guatemala, because it was very quick. And I know that was a consideration that my parents even had when they were looking at adopting a child. So I grew up in a small town called Pasadena, Maryland, which a lot of people don't know about.
I know about the other Pasadena, but not the one in Maryland.
Yes, Pasadena, California. And Pasadena, Maryland is very different. It's a pretty small town. It's pretty conservative. And I was one of the only people of color who was in my community growing up.
Wow.
And that brought its own set of challenges, especially as I got a little bit older.
Mm-hmm.
I remember from a very young age, kids telling me that I was different than them, because the reality is I looked different than a lot of them. And my parents were white. And, the reality of adoption in the 90s is that parents were told not to talk about their child's race. And that created a lot of layers.
We're colorblind.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really tricky. And it's like, they're all the same. We don't even notice. That was kind of the atmosphere then. I totally remember that.
Yeah.
So that's the stew you were brewing in, right?
Yes. Yeah. And it was difficult for me to find my place in that community. And adding to that layer was also being a gay person in a community where that was also not acceptable.
How old were you when you realized you were different? Maybe you knew the word gay or not. I don't know. When did that happen for you?
I guess there's two pieces to that. I was different the whole time. And there are pictures for me at my daycare as a child in a pink princess dress.
Nice.
And so I was always a little bit different. I probably could finally put words to it in high school. It took that long for me to realize. And I actually didn't come out to anyone until I was in college.
Oh, wow.
I think internally, I kind of just expected people to know in high school that I was different. And maybe even saw myself as different the whole time, but just was afraid to come out. And that process was hard. And, it intersects a little bit with my adoptive family's values. And so it was really challenging for me to come out to them. I remember my adopted mom saying when I came out to her that she didn't actually want me to be around when she told my father, because she was a little bit concerned about how he would react. There was a wedge there for a really long time. And I think even to this day, and I've been out it's been about 10 years actually since I came out to them. It's still something that we don't really talk about. And it's still something that I think keeps us at a little bit of a distance from each other, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And in preparing to eventually meet my birth family, which I'll talk a little bit about later, that was a really big consideration for me because it's just an added layer there on top of all of the other nerves that folks might have about whatever comes from that.
Yeah, that's what really is remarkable about your story is that you don't think about it until you hear a story like yours. Like people that are gay or trans or whatever they are, they have to come out again. They had to come out once to their family, their adoptive family, and then they've got to figure out if and how and when they're going to come out when they are in reunion. And it just keeps on going. And, you know, adoption itself creates identity issues, and then the transracial aspect, and then the LGBTQ plus part. Before we get to your reunion, did you have anyone in your childhood that was a role model for you? Did you have any sort of support groups? Did they have GSAs back then at schools? Well, it used to be called Gay Straight Alliance. What is it called now?
Gender Sexuality Alliance.
So did you have anything like that back then?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I would say one of my biggest supporters was my grandmom.
Oh.
And it's interesting because, you know, she passed away right when I went to college. And so I finally came out to my adoptive parents right before she passed away.
Oh, wow.
And I actually never officially told her I was gay, but she knew. And I know that she knew.
Okay.
Because I got my ears pierced when I was really young. And I remember when I did it, I came home and she made a comment of, "Oh, you're actually gay now." And I did not know what to say. But there was just this unconditional love that she gave me.
Way to go, Grandma.
And, you know, she also was very religious. And for some reason, I think she just knows what I would say I know now, which is that God makes us the way that we are because that's the way that we're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. So her and I would talk a lot, and not always about that, but I felt seen and heard by her.
Nice.
In college, that was the first time that I actually got involved with the LGBTQ community. Okay. I was in the Lavender Leadership Honor Society at University of Maryland, which is where I went to school.
Nice.
And that was amazing because it was also the first time where I could talk with other queer people and had that community in a lot of ways. And really interestingly, because I went to college with a few of my friends from high school, the group of kids that I surrounded myself in high school, most of us were part of the LGBTQ community, even if we weren't out at the time. And so I think in some ways we're just naturally drawn to each other.
Yeah.
And I remember even when I came out to that group of friends, literally two other people in the group were like, "Well, if Joe is comfortable enough sharing, like, I'm going to come out too," at the same time.
Okay. Wow. So you found your people, even if they weren't labeled as your people yet. It's like magnets, right? We're drawn to our people that we know understand us or accept us. How did it go with your adoptive dad, by the way?
It was hard. And we lived in the same house at the time. We did not talk to each other for about 3 months. And when he finally came around to saying something, kind of said, "I'm thankful that you shared your truth with us, and I don't want to know about that part of your life."
Okay.
And for me, that was hard because as a lot of queer people, it might not be all of my life, and it might not be everything that I care about. But for me, I want to be able to be authentic with everyone in my life.
Yeah.
And there are still times where I don't feel like I can be authentically myself around my adoptive father. And that's kind of sad and that's hard.
Yeah, it is very sad. It's cutting off a whole piece of you, right? And if someone said that to a straight person, they'd be like, "Well, you can't be in my life then because this is a big piece of me." And yeah, and you were probably relying on them if you were still living with them. So you're like walking this line, right? Like, I want to be myself, but I also don't want to be homeless. Was it that dire? Like, you had to make a choice like that?
I'm very lucky because even though we don't agree, I hope and I feel like he wouldn't have kicked me out.
Okay.
But I was at the point where I was starting to pay rent after that point to live at home.
Oh, okay.
I felt like it might have just been the push I needed to go out and be who I am in some ways. Yeah. And that was a good thing, but also it meant that there were challenges. And I think for us, it became very clear that there was just some distance after I came out. And it's still, even to this day, like I said, I can still feel it sometimes. But I will say that at least my adoptive mom has come quite a long way with accepting me for who I am. And sometimes I question why, but that's, my therapist will say, it doesn't matter. She's come a long way. Yeah. And so I feel like we're starting to get there. And I feel like I am more me now than I've ever been.
Oh, that's great.
Because I'm comfortable with who I am.
Yay.
And I think they see that.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, what parent wouldn't be happy to have their child be fully authentically themselves, unless they have a lot of garbage in their way about LGBTQ. You are definitely not alone in that. I'm sure you've found other people that have struggled with their parents. And not that it's an excuse, but I know that we queer people think about it all the time and have thought about it for years and years and years. And when we finally come out, our parents have to then confront it and think about it. And sometimes it takes them a long time to come to the same conclusion, like, oh, okay, this is who my child is. Okay. But it takes a while. And the queer people are like, we need you on board right now because this is where I'm at. But sometimes they just literally can't get there. But they should try really hard.
Yeah. I do know that my mom at least felt comfortable chatting with at least a couple other people about it. I know
that's good.
My aunt and uncle, I think, also kind of tried to help navigate that when I came out. Like I know, and this kind of came out afterwards, but I know she went to them when I came out and tried to talk through it. So there were people there
good.
that helped navigate that situation, I think, for her, which is I'm grateful for.
That's very good. Okay, so now what was the process of finding your birth family? Did you like go looking for them or DNA or?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to that. And so where I can start is from a very young age, I always wondered more about where I was from. And I wondered more about who brought me into the world because I knew my adopted parents were not my biological parents. And so
they told you from a young age, right, that you were adopted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plus you probably figured because you didn't look like everyone else.
Yes.
It's harder to hide for transracial people.
It is. I don't look at anything like my parents. Mm. And my dad is Irish, so he's very pale.
Oh, okay.
It was very obvious from a young age. But I remember, especially when I was not feeling seen and heard, I used to have almost like I would dissociate a little bit and I would imagine who my birth mom was. Like I would just try to go to a place maybe that felt safer. Mm-hmm. And that continued for a really long time. And it wasn't until the pandemic hit, to be honest, that I had enough time to really sit and say, well, what's next? How can I finally try to do something about meeting my biological family? And I just started with a DNA test. Okay. I had a colleague who had gifted me a DNA test because I talked about my adoption, even though I didn't know what to do. And I was hesitant to do it right away. But when I did it, and I remember the results came back, and I was nervous, but I immediately called my friend and I was like, I got the results back. I really want to look at it right now. And so I did that. And I had heard that I was from Guatemala. That was never a surprise or a secret. But for the first time, the test that we use had a map, basically, where it lights up all of the places where you have DNA from.
Okay. And
for the first time, I saw on a map that I was Guatemalan and indigenous American, more specifically. Okay. I think it was about 65% indigenous American.
Oh, wow.
And then there was some European, like a little bit of European, particularly from Spain and Portugal, and some sub-Saharan African, which, again, knowing the history of Central America doesn't really surprise me. Mm-hmm. And that set off my mission to find out more.
Okay.
About 6 months later, one of the adoptee groups that I'm part of, and I just was asked to join the board of, which I'm really excited to do, called Adoptees with Guatemalan Roots.
Nice.
They shared a new resource from the government in Guatemala to help adoptees find their family if they're interested.
Wow. Nice.
And that was exciting to me because I did not feel like I should have to pay money to hire a searcher to go and find my family.
I know. I agree. You should not have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know Guatemala, they shut down adoption several years ago because I know I was looking in Guatemala, but it had closed down when I was considering adopting my son, which we ended up going to Japan. But Guatemala had already shut down. That was in 2003. Yeah. And so the government sounds like they're trying to rectify the situation a bit and help out adoptees.
Yeah, I think they are. And rightly so. There were a lot of people that were a little bit skeptical of the system. Mm-hmm. And I think I was too. But I had a friend who did it, and he actually found that his birth mom was in the United States, living one state over from where he was.
Wow.
And was able to connect with her. And I was like, wow, they really were able to find this person and connect them.
Okay.
and they have this relationship. So I immediately went and just started trying to dig out any information I had on my adoption because they needed kind of whatever you could provide. And I didn't have a lot. I tried to give them what I knew, which was basically my birth mother's name.
Okay.
And I had one of those little infant books from the hospital that I was born at.
With your footprint or something in it, that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I basically said, this is what I have. I don't have much more than that. That's where we can start. And it took them over a year. And then in February of 2023, I got an email that said, hi, from the Consulate of Guatemala. We have some information. We would like to meet with you.
Wow.
And I thought that was a little bit interesting because I expected them to just send me whatever.
What do they have to say to you? That's weird.
Yeah. And so I think I freaked out, but I responded and I said, I can meet almost any time. Just let me know. This is important. And they said, well, can you meet tonight? And I was like, okay.
Whoa.
And so we set up a Zoom meeting and I got on and they said, we found your biological family. We want to walk you through the information and we can help facilitate whatever else you might need from us.
Okay.
In that, they gave me my birth mom's phone number. Literally, they said, you can call her.
Wow. Okay.
I did not grow up speaking Spanish.
Okay.
And my birth mom only speaks Spanish, so I did not feel comfortable just calling her.
Yeah.
But they were able to connect me with, it's called Consejo Nacional de Adopciones, which is the National Center for Adoptions.
Oh, okay.
To set up a meeting.
Okay. With a translator?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I met my birth mom and one of my biological sisters about a month later on Zoom.
Wow.
And that was crazy.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Okay. And the translator helped you navigate this tricky thing. Okay. So going back to kind of coming out again, Guatemala, I believe, is a very Catholic country, kind of conservative social values. Mm-hmm. Were you concerned that you would meet these people and they would find out you're gay and then they'd be like, see you later?
Yeah.
How did you process all that?
I'm very lucky because I have a therapist that I can talk to about all of this.
Yay! Yay, therapy!
Yes. And I also have a couple of friends who had been in reunion, and so I was able to talk through some of this. And I was very nervous because in that initial record that I got, it said that my birth mom was evangelical. And I was very scared that she would not be able to accept me for who I am.
Is that the same kind of Christian that your adoptive family was, or something different?
It's a little bit. Yeah, I grew up Irish Catholic.
Okay. So your adoptive parents are Catholic and your birth family is evangelical. I would have guessed the other way around, but okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. But I think from being in the world, I've seen how people react to LGBTQ plus people in different religions. And so I was nervous and I had to be okay with the fact that they might not accept me for who I am. And I kind of had two options. I could hide who I was to have a relationship and not be true to myself, which I had done for my entire life. Well, not my entire life. I had been out, but for a lot of my life, I hid who I was.
Yep. Till college, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Or I could share who I was authentically, knowing the risk that they might not want a relationship with me, but genuinely be who I am. And for me, I had done a lot of work in therapy and support groups with friends to finally be comfortable with who I was. And so the thought of hiding who I was just wasn't really on the table for me, even if it meant not having a relationship with them.
Gosh.
I remember we'd gotten through the meeting, which is already emotionally driven.
Sure.
And the last thing before we got off the call, and I said, I have one more thing I need to share. It's really important that I share it. And it's that I'm part of the community. And if you're not accepting of that, I understand, but it's really important that I'm who I am. And the translator actually stopped. And maybe it wasn't in his right to do this, but he was trying to look out for me, I think. He said, I can tell them this after you get off the call, if that will make you feel better.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no, I need you to tell them because it's important. And he told them. I think there was a little bit of shock, but my birth mom immediately said, you are the way that you are because that's how God made you.
Oh.
And I love you no matter what.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful.
And I just started crying. And even when I share it now, I kind of get a little bit emotional because my brain does the worst of the worst.
Sure.
And I knew that she just wanted to have a relationship with me. And we got to meet in person later that summer. And one of her gifts to me, it was a Bible. And that is one of the ways that she gets through a lot in her life is by her religion. But it's a rainbow Bible. So it has different colors on different pages. And I know that was her way of telling me, I'm here for you and I accept you no matter what.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
And that is the best possible outcome that there could have been.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of courage for me to do that. But I'm so glad that I was true to myself in that moment.
Yes. I fully support you and anyone. And if it had gone the other way, then they don't deserve to have a relationship with you. You know, all you have is yourself. You have to be authentic to yourself. I'm very proud of you for doing that. Even the translator is trying to give you an out and you're like, no, I want them to know who I am. It's so important. I hope things are coming around a bit more. And I hope that if maybe an LGBTQ adoptee is listening to this, they will have more courage from your story. Not that every story will end up as happy as yours has so far, but just the goal of being who you are completely and totally and letting other people figure out how they want to be with you. It's a risk though. It's a surrendering.
Yeah.
Do you have any other advice for an LGBTQ adoptee?
Yeah. I would say there's always people that are willing to connect and chat about their experiences. Mm-hmm. I'm part of a couple of different adoptee groups at this point, and all of which I think when I first entered those spaces, I was a little bit scared. But I've made so many other friends who are part of the LGBTQ community and are adopted who can just share their experience with being out and some of the heartbreaks that they've gone through even, and some of the challenges that they've faced. Mm-hmm. And so don't be afraid to reach out. I'm always happy to have conversations. I know other people are, and you're never alone in this journey that you're on. Totally.
A lot of queer people have to sometimes make their own families, but most of us are very friendly and happy to add extra relatives, you know. We're here to support each other. Do you know of any adoption LGBTQ group?
I don't. And there's a couple of spaces that I will say have existed at different points. When Clubhouse was a big thing, which I don't think ever super caught on, but it did a little bit. I was part of a group for queer adoptees that I think has since disappeared a little bit, but there's still members that I talk to every once in a while.
Okay.
And there are some groups that have made spaces for LGBTQ adoptees. So Adoptees of Guatemalan roots, we're talking about potentially this year hosting a meetup at Pride in Guatemala even.
Oh, nice. Nice that there's a Pride in Guatemala and nice that you're going to go together. That's lovely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, what advice do you have for adoptive parents or birth parents that have an LGBTQ plus child?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give is just to be there for them. Let them know that you love them and you care about them. Mm-hmm. And it might be hard. There might be some work that you will have to do, not around your child. And that is okay. And I think it's natural. But what your child really needs is for you to tell them that you love them no matter what. And the last thing I'll say, and I think being that advocate, not only in your child's life, but in your community, might be the difference of saving other queer kids as well. And definitely. I just encourage people to learn more about the community if you don't know about it. Learn about the risks that queer kids face in a lot of places, because I think the last thing that any parent wants is for their child to be in harm's way.
For sure.
So yeah, I'll stop there. But
yeah, everyone, parents or not parents, everyone can come on board and help our trans and gay kids and non-binary kids. It's really rough out there. And I'll put a few resources in there. I know PFLAG is a great resource for allies and family members. And also the Trevor Project is doing great work in the area. Is there any other organizations, not adoption related, that you can recommend?
Yeah, another one that I just point people to, especially in education space, is GLSEN.
Oh, yeah.
They have a lot of resources. There's a couple others, but those are the big ones, and those are great places to start.
Yeah, everybody can help. Very good. If people wanted to get a hold of you, or if they needed support or wanted to collaborate with you, how could they do that?
Yeah, I'm on social media. I would say that's the easiest way to connect with me. So on Instagram and X, I guess, or Twitter. My username is Toolan, which is my last name, _Joe. And you can find me there, and happy to connect with anybody.
Great. I'll list that in the notes too, in case people are driving right now or on a jog or something. So you can look up the show notes. Well, definitely everyone go connect with Joe on any of those ways and support our LGBTQ plus adoptees as much as possible. And find Unraveling Adoption too at unravelingadoption.com. We have tons of resources. There's a lot of free things for adoptive parents and other opportunities for connection. I have a community calendar, a Healing the Adoption Constellation database, all sorts of stuff there, unravelingadoption.com. And I am so grateful to know you, Joe, and thank you very much for coming on this episode to share about your story.
First, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I wish you all the best as you continue to develop your relationship with your birth family in Guatemala. Thank you. And just a quick reminder of a town hall meeting we're hosting on Sunday, March 10th. It's going to be open to the public, so please help spread the word. The purpose of the town hall is to raise awareness about murders of adopted children at the hands of their adoptive parents. This has happened way more than we want to think about, and I know it's a tough topic, but I hope to see you there. We're going to try to come up with some action plans and some ways to combat the atrocities that are happening to the adopted children in our midst. Reservation information is below in the show notes. All right, everyone, please share this episode. Thanks for your support. And Joe and I want you all to stay safe.